Okay, on to our first panel. A reminder, as Chris said, to post your questions and rate questions via Pigeon, and to speakers who are live today and not recorded, to please stick to the 15-minute time frame. It will be very difficult for me to flag you if you're over, so I'm leaving that to you. Also, Audrey Disitu's Decision Making in Simultaneous talk, she couldn't be with us today, so that's available on the web asynchronously. Now, the speakers on our first panel will be addressing collective intelligence issues in the context of biological, neural, and robotic systems. And I'm going to introduce each person before they speak. Thalia Wheatley starts us off. Thalia is a professor in the Dartmouth Department of Psychological and Brain Sciences, where she runs the Social Systems Research Lab. She works on how minds align, transfer, and share information. And how her talk today, the title of it is How Conversation Creates Neural Synchrony in Groups. So welcome, Thalia.
Thank you, Jessica. Can everybody see me and hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and can I share my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're still not viewing your screen, Thalia. We're seeing
Yep. Do you see now?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. First, thank you, Jessica and Walter and Chris and Zach for putting this on. I'm excited to learn from all the speakers and see the posters. I'm going to be talking about how conversation creates neural synchrony in groups of humans. And first thing I want to do is acknowledge the engine behind all this work, which is my lab, post and present, and in particular, these two people, Carolyn Parkinson, who's now a professor at UCLA, and Bo Sievers, who's finishing up a postdoc at Harvard and is going to be looking for a job. So for those of you who may have a job, to give Bo, he's excellent. And Sophie Woltjen, I'm not going to be talking about her work, but she does excellent neural synchrony work through the lens of pupil dilations, and she has a poster. So please look for that. Okay, the first study that I want to present, I want to give you two studies that we've done on this idea of how conversation aligns minds. And the first is work by Carolyn Parkinson when she was a grad student with me. And our question was, are we friends with people of a similar mind? And now this is a very ancient intuition. This is birds of a feather flock together from the 15th century. And I'm sure it goes back beyond that, but basically, oh, oops. Something froze. Okay, can you see that? You can see that now? A new slide?
Yes.
Okay. When we think about homophily or what sort of clusters people together, we often think about demographics. So people cluster on age, for example, or gender. Think about the friends that you have, they're probably similar in age to you, for example. But there are all sorts of ways that people cluster, and you can start to study this by looking at a social network. I keep losing privileges. Okay. And the nice thing about being at Dartmouth, which is I'm external faculty at SFI, but my primary job is professor at Dartmouth. And Dartmouth, if you know colleges in the US, know it's pretty remote. It's in the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire. And it's beautiful, but there are no people. There you see some people in the bottom left or bottom right, but that's about it. And if you look at the business school, it's even more cloistered, it's even more isolated. So this is Tuck, the business school. And the nice thing about Tuck is that students in Tuck, they study together, they take classes together, they eat together, they even live together, all in interconnected buildings. So they don't even have to leave their little campus within this isolated community. And it's really the ideal opportunity to study a closed social network. And so we asked all of a Tuck cohort of 250 MBA students this very simple question. Consider the people with whom you like to spend your free time. Since you arrived at Dartmouth, who are the classmates you've been with most often for informal social activities, such as going out to lunch, dinner, drinks, films, visiting one another's homes, and so on. And basically what this question is setting up is, okay, this is a definition of what a friend is. And then we give them this big roster of all 250 of their classmates, and we basically say, okay, who are you friends with? Check them off. And because we got everybody to do this as part of the coursework, we could establish what this network really looks like, who's friends with whom. And the orange circles that you see are the people that we studied in this brain scan. And what you can see with the orange dots is that some people are friends. That means they are one path length removed from each other. They both say that they're friends with each other. You can also see that some people are friends of friends. They're not directly friends, but they're friends through someone else. And there are people who are friends of friends of friends, which is 3 path lengths removed. All right, we got these people into a scanner one at a time, and we showed them previously unseen video clips. So nobody had seen these before, and we're just scanning their brains while they're watching. And I'm going to give you a sense of the breadth of things that we showed them: comedy clips, political videos, science videos, etc. Keep in mind that what they saw was much longer versions of all of these things, but I want to give you a sense of what they saw. Okay, so we showed them those video clips, and I'm hoping that you heard the sound there, but I'll just go on and assume that's the case. What we did was we had them watch those video clips, and then we took their brain images, and we basically parcellated them into 80 different bits of the brain. And then we did something very mathematically simple, which is we took the time series of the oxygenation levels in each brain area, the average oxygenation levels. So when neurons fire, they eat up oxygen, and then blood comes in and compensates for that decreased oxygen in the blood, and that we can track that with fMRI. And so that's basically an indirect measure of neural activity, these time series of oxygen levels. And we can compare how similar two people are by comparing the time series from the equivalent parts of the brain pairwise across everybody in the sample. And here's what we found. You don't need to read all of these. These are the 80 different regions that were anatomically divided in everybody's brain. And what was remarkable was that if you look at the overall similarity between people, when you have friends of friends of friends, these are people who are 3 path lengths removed in a network, you see that on average, across all of these brain regions, they are relatively dissimilar. The patterns of their neural activity are relatively dissimilar compared to if you go in just one step. That's another way of looking at it, painted onto the brain. If you go one step closer in a network to friends of friends, then the brain starts to look much more similar, as responding in a more similar way. And friends are remarkably similar. Not every single brain area, but the vast majority of brain areas. Friends seem to have brain activity that is much more in sync with each other. Now, they're just watching the movies by themselves. They've never seen them before, but people who are naturally friends in a network tend to see the world the same way. So are we friends with people of a similar mind? The answer is yes, because the deep question is, why are we friends with people of a similar mind? And there are 2 possibilities, right, that are not mutually exclusive. One is, Do we just befriend people who are like us? Do we come into the world a certain way and we find people who are like us and those people are our friends? Or do we shape each other? When we're thrown together, do we influence each other? Do we become more similar due to shared experience? Now, I sure hope the answer to the second question is yes. I mean, if you look at our entire justice system, it depends on jury deliberations that assume this is true. And I think if you see things like, public opinion changing on gay marriage or Black Lives Matter, it must be the case that we shape each other. And we wanted to look under the hood and see sort of how this works. So this is the second study I want to talk about. And this is done with Bo Sievers and Chris Welker, who's a grad student of mine, Adam Kleinbaum, again at Tuck, and my collaborator Uri Hassan at Princeton. So in this study, people are watching movie clips again, but this time the sound's off and they can't really tell what's going on by design. They are ambiguous movies, and I'm going to give you a clip, just a little snippet, so you can see that it's quite hard to tell what's going on. Okay, so what's going on there? What is Nicole Kidman doing? What's her relationship with the kid? It's very difficult to understand. And so we had people watch these things while they're in the magnet, and then we brought them together. And we got them in groups of anywhere from 3 to 6 people, and we had them hash out their interpretations of what was happening in the clips and come to a consensus for each clip they saw. And then we put them back in the scanner and we had them see the clips again, right? Now, after having discussed them as a group, they saw the same clips again. And they also saw new clips from further along in the movie. So the same characters, but they'd never seen them before and therefore had never discussed them. And the first result is that conversation indeed synchronizes brain activity within groups. It shapes people to help them coalesce their mental models. The way we showed this is a very simply, again, intersubject correlation. So for all participant pairs, for all movies, we looked at how similar people are before and after conversation. And we created these things we call change maps, which is simply how much did they change? How much did they come into alignment after conversation relative to before? And the main finding is this, that across the brain, you see that people come into alignment. These areas of the brain, the lateral views are on the left and the right are medial views. These are all the brain areas that had increased synchrony when viewing the clips a second time after conversation. Now, this is only true within a group. It isn't true across groups. It isn't true for control participants who never had a conversation. It's not about seeing them a second time. It's not about just talking about anything. It's that within a group, that those group members came to see the world in the same way. And this synchrony persisted even for novel clips. It aligned people's mental models, and those persisted into the future and changed the way they saw new information. And what was discussed mattered. So if you look at one group, looking at several different movies, you'll see that the alignment patterns, so the bright green areas are the areas that came into alignment after conversation, those change depending on what movie they're watching. And that makes sense because the brain doesn't have an alignment area that becomes more active. It's that depending on what is discussed, depending on the interpretations that you come up with, that changes how you become in sync and what parts of the brain get into sync. And even if you take the same movie, like this movie that you saw a clip of, and you look across groups, you'll see that even though they saw the exact same movie, because they had different interpretations through conversation, they came to be in alignment with each other in different ways. And across all of these cases, if you look at a single region that comes into alignment, what you'll see is the same thing. That before conversation, everybody looks sort of idiosyncratic. Each line here is a different person in the group. And this is their brain activity superimposed on top of each other before conversation when viewing a clip, and this is after conversation. And you can see how tight it gets because now people are seeing it through the same lens. And you can in fact do a contrast here and look for the change in intersubject correlation. Where in terms of the clip that they're watching do people have the biggest shifts in coming into synchrony? And you can see here are some of the peaks. And these correspond to the pivotal sort of narrative moments in a clip. So here at the end is when he sinks to the floor. This is when groups say, okay, that's the moment that defines this clip, and that's what we were talking about in the conversation. So one thing I didn't tell you is whether or not people come into alignment in exactly the same amount, so everybody comes an equal amount together, or whether people have a disproportionate influence on that sort of neural gravity, whether some people have a disproportionate sort of force on how people who aligns to whom. And because we engineered the group from the tuck population, we actually could tell who are the most influential people in their network and see if that made an effect. And in fact, it did. So if you take, I'm not gonna have time to go into this, but if you take centrality measures, people who are influential in their network in terms of centrality, and you do a PCA, so you get a general centrality measure, who's more central than others. These are the people in our sample. The bigger dots are the more central. And we made pool maps as to who pulls whom. And the question is, do highly central people exert pull on others' mental states? And the answer that we found is that not really. Centrality did not predict pull on others in terms of them, highly central people pulling others to their own point of view, as much as the opposite, that being highly central predicted being pulled by others more, by being adaptive to other points of view, and in fact then rallying the group around that point of view and increasing synchrony that way. So in summary, in this conversation study, people's brains become more synchronized after conversation. That localization is content and context dependent, depending on what they talked about. And highly central people are more likely to adapt their neural patterns to others in the group. I think I want to end with this sort of metaphor of this video of metronomes. And you're going to see that they're starting off in different places, but here's my colleague Uri Hassan putting them on cylinders so they can, in fact, provide feedback to each other. They can talk to each other. And you'll see that they come into alignment, right? Now, this is kind of a cute metaphor for conversation, but I don't think it's wrong. I think that conversation is, in fact, neurofeedback. It's the primary mechanism we have as a species to influence other minds and through which we align our mental models to each other. It's the game changer that separated us from other apes. We think about language as being the game changer. Well, yes, but it's a common language that made the difference. It isn't about putting thoughts into sounds so much as it is about having those sound meaning mappings that create a platform for other minds to meet, right? Talking changes thinking, not only in the speaker, but critically in the listener. And it is the reason why conversation is the most ubiquitous behavior of our species, even now with social distancing and masks. And for good reason. It allows conversation to conversation. It allows ideas to leap from one brain to the next and ripple outward through the vast social networks we inhabit. Thank you.